Okay, we had a very nice introduction from people from inside about how can a company really help us towards energy efficiency. And the main topic of our panel now will be smart infrastructure and how can smart infrastructure help us towards minimizing the effects of energy crisis and energy poverty. So I will start with Minister. What is the strategic planning of your ministry regarding green infrastructure?
First of all, let me thank you for your very kind invitation. Thank the panelists also for participating here today. And let me begin by saying that as of today, we all understand public projects and public works as the typical road building. This has changed over the last 5 to 10 years, especially in Europe. In Greece, for a number of years, we were lagging behind. The new projects right now that we are running at the ministry have to do with rail projects. We have already tendered around 5 billion of rail projects. And we also have new generation projects, I like to call them in the ministry. Those have to do with anti-flooding projects. Those have to do with dam projects, with projects that address water issues. These are the projects that are being financed by European Union structural funds. They are being financed from the RRF. And the here is to move forward. Change my mind. So basically, let's start with rail. I think that in Greece, the huge undertaking here has a twofold strategy. On the one hand, we have to achieve all the very ambitious goals that have been set by the Green Deal decarbonization. I think that we all agree that rail is at the heart of the green agenda of Europe. And at the same time, it also transforms Greece, all those rail projects. Let's think about that. It transforms Greece into a multimodal, a logistics hub. Let's imagine that at some point in Greece, we have to do the obvious. We have to connect our rail with our ports. If, for instance, we want Greece to become a logistic hub of the greater Southeastern European region, we have, first of all, to advance our rail, and this is what we're doing, connect it with logistics centers. This is what we are doing with the Thriasio projects. And Piraeus can play a very important role being a port of entry for all goods that come from Southeastern Asia. It does that in some point today, but we have a lot of transshipment going on. And Thessaloniki has to be the getaway port for the Balkans. So we're connecting now, and those projects are in a tendering, they have already been tendered. We are connecting the port of Thessaloniki, of Kavala, of Alexandroupoli. Let me remind you here what an important role Alexandroupoli plays geopolitically. It can be transformed in an energy hub, in a logistics hub. By bypassing the straits, I think that we all understand, especially we that belong in the West, how important this is in today's changing world. So these are the projects that are at our priority right now. And these are the projects that are not only in our imaginations, but they're actually being implemented. I want to close by saying that in the last 3 years, we have tendered projects of 10 billion euros. We have contractualized projects of 4 billion euros. This has done in a record period of 3 years. Projects like that never took place for at least 20 years in Greece. And this is why you see a number of brilliant engineers like the ones you presented a few minutes ago, coming back to Greece because the construction and the energy sector can be a brain gain for young engineers and scientists that basically left Greece during the crisis. And this is something which we are very proud at the Mitsotakis government that we have managed right now to have a number of people that are not only considering to come back, that are actually coming back to find well-paid jobs in an industry that is very important for the Greek economy.
I couldn't agree more, especially when I'm talking about young children. We are academics, you know that we try to educate our students very well, and starting from keeping them here, not allowing them to leave, is the first step, and then moving to the next one, you know, attracting them back.
But when they leave, let's try and make a step to get them back.
Yes, of course.
And I think that this is happening at this point, and this is something that is extremely interesting. Actually, I was at the panel once, and I will close with that, with Mr. Stasinos, who is the chairman of the Technical Chamber of Commerce. And jokingly, he said, give me a resume of a good engineer, and I will find him a job in 24 hours in Greece. Imagine where we were 5 years ago and where we are today. I think this signifies and symbolizes that we have left the worst behind us.
Ambassador, let's talk about energy efficiency, which is, I think, one of the most crucial pillars in our energy discussions. So what's the story of energy efficiency in UK? How do you think that energy efficiency measures can help tackle the energy crisis in UK, and of course, also in the European Union, and how important these actions can be under the umbrella of smart cities, which is something that we will discuss?
Thank you very much, and thank you again for inviting me. It's a great honor to be here alongside the Minister. Energy efficiency, of course, is at the heart of the challenge that confronts us all. And for much of the world, much of Europe, I would argue that the smart cities aspect of that is absolutely fundamental, because in the UK, already some 80% of our population live in cities or towns. That's projected to rise to 90% by the end of the decade. And there are lots of good reasons for that and lots of positives deriving from it. But the reality is also, of course, that cities are in many cases responsible for a significant proportion of CO2 emissions, whether it's through transport system and mobility or through buildings and municipal infrastructure. So it's not something we can afford to ignore or escape from. From a British government perspective, I think it's quite telling the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution, as it was called, that my government announced and launched at the end of 2020, includes 10 points, but it includes 3 of those that relate specifically to cities and the urban environment. Including accelerating the shift towards zero-emission vehicles, both for public and private transport, fostering other green aspects of public transport, including cycling and walking and so on, and crucially addressing what in the UK is in many cases quite an old stock of both residential housing and other real estate. And I was delighted to hear that snippet from Insight earlier on, and even more delighted to hear that UK is on their horizon. So a warm welcome. But in the UK, our experience over recent years with using the smart cities concept, harnessing technology just in the way that these impressive young gentlemen are talking about, is a crucial element. A couple of examples in the city of Manchester that a number of you will know. Which is one of 14 European smart city and community projects. There's a project underway called Triangulum, which is a cloud-based energy management platform that effectively sort of functions as a virtual power plant, using the most efficient sources of energy, managing renewable supplies, and tapping into building management systems across the city, including the Central Library, the Town Hall, Manchester City Council and other buildings, so that it reduces its pressure on the grid and ensures that that big urban centre is making its contribution to trying to improve our efficiency. In London, we haven't yet, the scale of the city is such that we haven't got a project like Triangulum in place, but there are other areas where the City of London is pioneering clean tech products and sensors for helping address pollution and the effects of energy use and so on. So there's a whole range of areas where we in the UK are trying to push this forward. We've already made progress on smart meters. There's more than 9 million of them operating across the UK, which on the one hand sounds like an impressive figure, but when you think that we have a population of some 67 million people, you also get a sense of the scale of the task that still awaits us. And we have, in those slightly cooler Northern European climes, as I said, housing stock and some challenges about energy efficiency with housing insulation and energy use there. So there are various programs, and two other things I'd just highlight in concluding on that. I think from our government's point of view, there is a very clear recognition of the value that new technology can help us in delivering more efficiency, the role that the government can play in creating a tax and financial framework to incentivize both individual consumers and businesses. But I think the essential collaboration between the private sector and public sector and government in delivering that. And the last thing, I don't know whether you've got members of the audience who are in the construction industry, but there is an organization now called the Construction Leadership Council, which is promoting its own zero CO2 program for all new home building in the UK and using those technologies. So cities harnessing modern technology and recognizing the central role that will play in our own energy efficiency is very much at the front of the agenda.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ms. Spyraki, we know you have been discussing a lot about the energy agenda of European Union, and we know that energy efficiency is on top of that, maybe one of the most important pillars for Europe, and we have linked the achievement of energy efficiency with reduction of energy poverty, which is something very important. What has been achieved so far in the European Union, and then of course, which are the technologies that you think under the prism of smart infrastructure need to be developed, and we need to invest more in the future in them?
Thank you. Thank you for having me this. Allow me to change my micro as well. Maybe it works better. Well, much better. Thank you very much for having me in this very interesting and high-level debate. It is an honor to be here at the same panel with Minister Karamanlis, who is a leading figure in our government, in government of Kyriakos Mitsotakis, and who is also a pioneer in terms of critical infrastructure we need in Greece. To start with, I think that we have the proper legislative framework, a complementary legislative framework, which is consisted from effort share regulation, from the energy efficiency directive, from the energy performance of buildings directive, also for the renewable energy directive, which is now at the procedure of upgrading, RED 3 and RED 4. We have the proper and complementary legislative framework in order to make this the next steps. But we need to do more. We need to do more in terms, first of all, to implement this kind of very ambitious and very demanding legislative framework, starting with the energy efficiency for buildings, on which we voted in Strasbourg last December, and on which the energy efficiency on buildings is putting some very ambitious target on saving regulation of 2% of final energy consumption from January 2024 to 31 December of 2030. But we need also more in terms of infrastructures, and allow me to focus on it, because the key issue we have to implement our policy is the infrastructure. And the infrastructure meaning smart infrastructure, a combination with smart meters and digital infrastructure. At the same time, the infrastructure which have the capacity to proceed with RED 2 and RED 3 targets, to have the deployment installation of renewables at large scale or at small scale PV at rooftops. We need also, and allow me to conclude with this, to increase public acceptance in terms of renewables. In cities, in smaller cities, in smart cities, the number one issue is to have a lot in terms of quantity, and at the same time with low prices energy. And the only energy that we can consume in that way is the green energy. So we need to increase public acceptance, we need to increase public awareness, we need to engage people in this regard, and we need to give incentives in order to proceed in such direction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mitropoulos, in terms of energy companies and companies that deal with customers, there are millions of customers in Europe and in Greece also. Do you consider that smart infrastructure is an important means towards reduced household consumption, which is something that really customers care about? And what's your view of Fysiko Aerio on this? And then do you really provide customers, apart from smart infrastructure, with smart services, which is the next level of, interaction between companies and customers?
Well, definitely smart infrastructure may provide savings in energy, together with many other things. This is, I would say, this is not the future. This is present. I can tell you a few things about a service that we have launched in 2022, so this year. A few months ago, we have launched SmartThing. SmartThing is the first commercially available service, which is using artificial intelligence technology, which can offer actual savings today. This is a project that we started 3 years ago. The last 2 years, we have run pilot programs. And I can tell you that SmartThing can offer 20% savings in energy in a household. Now, what SmartThing is? SmartThing is a ecosystem of smart devices and a mobile app. So it's something similar inside what we've seen just before. It communicates with via internet to an IoT platform, and also it's operating 6 machine learning algorithms. Now, what it does is, apart from offering a number of information to the residents. So, for example, the consumer may know on a real-time basis what the consumption in her or his house is, and the consumption per appliance, what's operating, what's not operating. The most important feature is that the machine can actually learn about the preferences of the residents. It learns how they react, what are their comfort conditions preferred from the residents. And from one point on, it starts controlling the appliances in the house. And finally, it may achieve 20% savings. Now, this service is operating regardless the provider, and also it covers all types of energy used in the house. So it's either gas or electricity or diesel or whatever. When we started 3 years ago working on the project, okay, we knew, and it's inherent in our strategy, that the future is smart infrastructure. This is the future. But this service is very useful today, and it is available in the Greek market.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that customers will really need to get to know this, so you need to educate people to understand the profits that they're getting. And when you're talking about high skyrocketed energy prices, when you're talking about 20% reduction in energy, something that's really extremely important and very, 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 appealing to customers. I think that's something very interesting.
And what we see is that the future is the provision of services in a house based on the artificial intelligence from a platform. So the future of this service is to support also things like peer-to-peer transactions in the future, demand response services, e-mobility, and a number of other things. So this is going to be the control of the house, of course, on the basis that the residents will allow that to operate.
We need to bring the future today, which is something that we need to do. We need to act very fast. So, Mr. Popp, thank you for being with us. Okay, we have been discussing a lot about smart infrastructure. What I want to know is, do you believe that investments in smart infrastructure is something that is really necessary? And which sectors are those that need more attention, or maybe we need to prioritize and start with? And what is the approach of Omexom to tackle the challenge of smart local infrastructure solutions?
So first of all, thank you for giving us the opportunity to be part of this very interesting roundtable discussion. I think there's a, no? Sorry, maybe this one is better. So yeah, regarding, and so we are convinced that even strongly increasing investments are necessary to achieve the energy transition and also the new net zero emission 2050 targets. But before entering a bit deeper, I'd like to explain a little bit what's behind Omexom, because I think if you don't know us. So Omexom, we are part of the French but very international Vinci group. So I don't know. It's really, maybe.
Can I have a microphone, please?
Maybe I do something wrong. Huh? It's the mic, yeah. You can hear us? Okay, so I'll continue. So, okay, so part of the Vinci group, and Omexom is the brand at Vinci Energy that is dedicated to energy, mainly in, so, okay, it sounds better. Good. Yeah, and we are a network of more than 23,000 experts, and you talked about young engineers, so it's a nice place to be at Vinci Energies at Omexom. We have more than 430 business units in 80 countries around across the globe. And yeah, our objective to help our customers to achieve the energy transition, which is at the end from fossil to renewables. And yeah, this is clearly a very complex and a long-term global project. Now, to answer your question, so we have a lot of insights in what's going on and what's needed along the entire value chain of energy, because we do power, we do transmission, we do transformation, we do distribution, we do territory business, and we know our customers and their needs. So, and on the other side, all the science and the mega trends shows very clearly the need to invest a lot. And in many cases, it's also very urgent. Just talking about Paris Agreement, net zero emission by 2050 roadmaps, etc. So, and then on the other side, serious forecasts predict that investments in electrical grids, especially in electrical grids, will likely triple by 2030, which is huge, and it's very soon, nearly tomorrow. And I think there's even more to do than we are likely be able to implement, because there is a huge bottleneck. And which is at the end a lack of people everywhere, where we need to spend much more attention on it. So it's less a question of the let's say of the area of activities on the part of the grids. It's really this kind of problems we will see in the future. So yeah, again, yes, and very clearly, huge investments are necessary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kalogirou. Thank you for being with us. And can you just describe us in short words how important it is for Cyprus to implement actions regarding energy efficiency, and which are these actions that have been implemented, will be implemented in the future, especially in the residential industrial sectors?
First of all, can you hear me? A good one. Okay, first of all, thank you very much for your kind invitation, especially to be present in this high-level panel. Let me, with your permission, start a little bit differently. Being the editor-in-chief of Renewable Energy, I would like to say a few words about Renewable, just to join this discussion with Renewable that was this presentation earlier in the morning. So, as a person that in my almost 40 years of scientific and academic life, I'm dealing with renewables and trying to convince people that we need to move toward renewable because it's more friendly to the environment. It's not so bad as a source of energy. It's not so problematic as it made some people from time to time wanted to show. Now I'm very happy that everybody talks about renewables. It's unfortunate, however, that this happened because of a war. And, but on the other hand, let's take this unfortunate event into an advantage and use it to apply more and more renewables. I hope this will be, and I guess that this will be done because this is a clear policy of European Union that we all belong. So this, I think, will give a new boost to the whole technology. Renewables are not problematic. They have their technical problems. They're solvable. There are people that they know how to deal with them. There are always technologies to alleviate, let's say, the risk of not having it because of storage, because of other things. For example, we're here now about green hydrogen, which is a great idea, in fact, in the fact that when you have more enough, your grid, you can convert it to hydrogen. That's we call it green because it's in a user-friendly, in a friendly way. And another issue, we should never underestimate the climate effects. We saw what happens last year in Germany, developed country, very well developed country. A year earlier in India, where again millions of people were dislocated from their houses because of the climate effects. And even 2 weeks ago in Pakistan, where three times the size of Portugal was flooded and millions of people were lost their properties, others passed away because of that effect. And now we have also this internationally known term now called climate refugees, meaning people that have lost their properties because of the climate effects. It's something very serious we need to face and something that affects everybody. It doesn't matter where you live, it's transboundary the problem. It doesn't mean that if you pollute here as a country, your neighbor will not be affected or the other way around. We are living all on the same planet. Closing this short introduction, I would like to say a few words about your question. Is that definitely energy conservation measures and energy saving measures are the best. We all know the motto that the more green hydrogen, the more green, kilowatt hours, the kilowatt hour you don't spend. It means that it's better to save energy and then try to complement the other forms of energy, mostly with renewables. This is one thing. Especially for a country like Cyprus that imports every drop of oil. Unfortunately, we still use oil. That was unfortunate in one sense because we are paying penalties to the European Union for many years because we haven't adapted natural gas in our power system. However, now we are lucky because we are not at least connected with the Russian gas. And we still import from the other Arab countries oil. So this is quite important. There are a lot of measures that have been taken over the years, subsidies in insulating the roof, change the double glazing of into double glazing the glass of houses. Unfortunately, we're a country where, although we have very nice and very good solar potential, with 93% of our houses having a solar water heater, so we don't have this, let's say, to convince people to put renewables on their houses or on their properties. They know very well the technology. And despite this, we haven't done anything concerning the infrastructure regarding buildings. Before 2009, where the first EU directive about energy performance of buildings was implemented, anybody could build anything without any regulation. The only thing that the people in the government were checking was the square meters of the plot, where you have the certain percentage coverage and nothing else. Nothing about insulation, about glazing, about orientation, about anything else that now are considered. And people proved that after this initial directive that was put in action, that they were doing much more. For example, I remember the first U value for the walls of 0.83, and the people were building with half of it. And now the new, of course, figure is less than half. Which means that people are willing to adapt this measure. And once there are some subsidies as well to help the ones that do not afford to spend a lot of money in improving their houses, even better. I will stop here and I will come back later more.
Okay, the interesting about this panel is that on the borders is the academia, and we start with the minister, which is a representative of the state, and continue with our honorable ambassador, which can really be the interlink between the borders between Europe and UK, and continue with the residents of companies, Greek company, big Greek company, and also international companies. So I think it comprises all the elements that we need to tackle in this discussion. So, Minister, let's come to electromobility, which is something very important. I know you've been discussing also in previous panels about this. How many electric cars are in circulation in Greece? And then what are the next steps that your ministry is aiming for promotion of electromobility in Greece? I know that you are very fond of this. I know that you've been working a lot on this, and I think the steps that we have taken in the last years are really impressive.
Yes, they are. I mean, if we think about where we were 3 years ago, the numbers were quite disappointing. And I have some numbers here to share with you. Within the last couple of years, we have had a significant increase when it comes to electric EV vehicles. Let's use that term, which is quite applicable here, in Greece. In 3 years ago, we had only 0.7% of the total car fleet being EV. Today, it's almost 7% of the market. I think that we all agree here, most of the panelists said it, but I think we have to understand that transport is responsible for 30% of CO2 emissions. So we have to move very fast. Greece is still lagging behind. And this is why the government is still basically giving very favorable, I would say, incentives so that we have people can basically go and buy an electric car. But we are not basically stopping there, because right now we are through the tendering process of getting electrical buses. We have basically guaranteed finance from the RRF, because, in the past, everyone was talking about electric buses, but it was very difficult to get funding because those buses are quite expensive. And not only that, we are going to get around 280 buses in Athens and Thessaloniki by 2023. So Athens and Thessaloniki are going to be two cities which will have one of the biggest fleets of electrical buses in the European Union. But I think that we have to actually plan ahead also, because electromobility is the future, it's the present. There is a huge question mark here in Greece and in Europe about the grids, about capacity. This is something which is a problem all over Europe, and I think that we haven't found right now sustainable solutions. Think about a big city like London, like Paris. Where are you going to charge all those cars? Actually, in the tendering process we have with the buses, it is included that we must have a very, very practical solution of where to charge the buses, because you can imagine that if you go and charge in a neighborhood 150 buses, that this will create a lot of energy problems. And I really believe that today in Europe, there is also a very interesting debate about hydrogen. And I think that when it comes to heavy-duty vehicles, this is something that we have to start examining quite quickly. So in the next tendering process we will consider to also have a piloting program of hydrogen buses. You can all imagine that those buses are extremely expensive because the technology is still at the very first level. But to conclude, I would say that in Greece, we've made extremely significant steps when it comes to e-mobility. But let's be honest, and let's not, try to gloat about it. We still have a lot of road. We still have to cover many steps if we want to reach a very ambitious goals that the Mitsotakis government has set in motion. 1 out of 3 cars by 2030 to be electric. So we are moving very fast with all responsible ministries. It's not only my ministry, it's the Ministry of Energy. It's the Ministry of Finance that has to find the funds to support all those incentives, financial incentives. And I believe that we will manage to be very close to this target by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Ambassador, on the other hand, UK is at the forefront of electromobility, and we should learn from your experience and how have you tackled all the challenges, and what were the supporting actions that you had to take in order to boost electromobility in UK, and maybe what are the problems that we have been facing all these years? I think the Minister mentioned some of them, but what is from your experience in UK?
Thank you, Spiro. And I think, I mean, if I may, there's a lot of learning that can be done in both directions. So we certainly wouldn't put ourselves on anything of a pedestal. And just, I'd like to pick up on a couple of comments that Markus, Mr. Popp made about the scale of the investment more broadly. And also the point I think was implicit in Mr. Kalogirou's comment about, comment about harnessing popular support. Because from the UK experience, my government has consciously put in an approach of both, if you like, sort of carrot and stick in terms of policy decisions and legislation. And some of that, given that we're sat here in the last quarter of 2022, is quite striking when you recognize that the government has declared that there will be an end to the sale of new petrol and diesel vehicles by 2030, only 8 years hence. And by 2035, all new vehicles being sold will be required to be 100% zero emission. So, you know, that's a big challenge and quite a bold step. Let's see how we manage to deliver it. The government has also allocated significant public funding and private funding into trying to get the zero emission vehicle sector going. That's taken different forms, but it includes investment in new battery sites, gigafactories for mass scale up production of batteries and charging infrastructure. I remember last year, alongside Mr. Karamanlis, we were talking about electromobility and so on. In the UK, at the moment, we have over 30,000 public charging points, and about 100 more are being installed every month. That sounds quite good. You consider the scale of the UK, and by 2030, we're aiming to have multiplied that by a factor of 10, so 300,000 charging points by the end of the decade. But that is a £1.6 billion public infrastructure investment. So it's an enormous task. Buses, public transport. We've funded some 1,700 zero emission buses, but the investment there is enormous. And we've also had schemes to incentivize the use of active travel. I talked about walking and cycling earlier on, but we've seen cycling increase in the UK by some 75% over the last few years. And it's one of the things I was commenting to you about when we talked before this afternoon session. It's great to see in Athens, a city I was in 20 years ago, so many more people on bicycles and so on these days. So there are all of those measures. We've currently got, for a UK population, as I said, so over 67 million people, we've got 520,000 pure electric cars on British roads at the moment. And if you count plug-in hybrids, we've got nearly a million, 930,000 plug-in models in addition. But that's, and I don't have the percentage, so nobody can make the direct comparison with what the minister was saying, but that still is a small proportion of what it needs to be. So there's a whole series of tools that the UK government is using to try and, as I say, incentivize and encourage. There's a Faraday challenge, which is some £300 million in research and investment projects specifically to drive growth in the battery industry. We've got a battery industrialization center, first facility of its kind in the world, we believe, helping companies to develop their capabilities and manufacturing batteries, scaling up and reaching global markets. And we're also investing through what we're calling the Drive the Electronic Revolution Challenge in electrification technologies, including power electronics, electric machines and so on. And picking up on a point the minister made about the challenge if you've got 150 buses being charged in the neighborhood, our Office of Gas and Electricity Markets, our regulator in the UK, is working with our Energy Networks Association to accelerate investment to free up capacity in electricity networks explicitly so that we can support increased electric vehicle usage across the country. So it's an enormous challenge, as we heard from Mr. Popp earlier, and I don't think any of us can or should congratulate ourselves, but I hope we can all be learning from the examples and the experience that we're all confronting. If I may indulge me for 10 seconds, because I think there's an interesting challenge that perhaps goes beyond the energy community, and we're seeing enough of challenges with energy with what's happening in Ukraine at the moment. But it is, of course, for those engineers who know about this, the inescapable fact that electrical vehicle technology requires rare metals and critical mineral supplies at a scale that conventional vehicles have not. And so that is another area that the British government, working with partners, is looking at focusing on, both in terms of building up our domestic capacity, but also identifying how we can work together to secure and maintain those supplies on a sustainable basis. And that is something that we can only do in international partnership. So it's not just a national endeavor, but it's an international one. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, for both Minister and the Ambassador, I would say that bold targets will bring bold results. So it's something that we need to act. We need to have to aim high in order to get the best that we can. And Ms. Spyraki, I'll come back to energy efficiency and asking about what are the proposed actions to engage stakeholders, engage people, increase energy efficiency awareness, and empower people to act, because people are listening to energy efficiency, and I don't know if they really know what they should do.
If I may, and I think it's not working. Maybe this one. This is working, yes, much better, I hope. Well, if I may, I would like to make a comment on Minister's approach, saying that sustainability is, according to my opinion, one of the main dimensions we have to set not only in public infrastructure, but also in everyday life, food, behaving, etc. So it is important now to open the discussion on the issue of electric vehicles, considering that the European Union has made also a very significant step forward on the battery regulation, starting with importing rare earths in Europe and creating batteries, making batteries, then reusing batteries with the batteries passport, reusing once, twice, 3 times, and then recycling batteries and keeping the rare earths here in the EU without exporting the final outcome of batteries. So by saying this, I would like to come back to your question and saying that the engagement of the people, raising people awareness is something that it is a key element on the issue of reducing consumption. And I would like to give you 2 indicative numbers in order to understand how much could we finally save by changing, by making behavioral changing. For instance, in the United States, there are some kind of estimation suggesting that up to 20% of home energy demand could potentially be saved from behavioral changes in the residential sector. And going to India, which is, of course, one of the biggest consumers in terms of energy, one estimate for India suggests the potential for energy savings through behavioral adjustment to be in the range of 3.4 to 10.2 terawatt hours per year by 2030. So the case is huge. And now how should we speed up the process? We need targeting campaigns. We need to engage people. We need to get the message right. We need to get the message across. And we need to combine information with behavioral insights and to give emphasis on engaging European people, meaning on engaging people that they are having their own properties in a building. And by saying this, I will go back to the European legislation by saying that RED 3 and also RED 4 will finally give the opportunity to the European level, create the go-to areas in order to have enough quantity of green energy coming from solar panels, but also giving the opportunity to PV at the rooftops. It is one of the facilitators. This kind of legislation is working as a facilitator in order to reduce the permit time the permission time in the member states. So it's time first to proceed as fast as we can in terms of the European Union in RED IV, and then to the member states to implement as fast as they can. Particularly in Greece, the Prime Minister has already announced a program with 250,000 PV solar panels, particularly for households and SMEs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Spyraki. Mr. Mitropoulos, what is your prediction? Let's go to customers again, which is something very important. What is your prediction about energy costs? And how could the energy companies really can act to alleviate these costs, and of course in comparison with customers, and how can you really lessen the burden that customers are having nowadays, especially in Europe, in terms of paying their electricity bills?
Regarding forecasting, I can tell you, this is my opinion. I believe that it is impossible to forecast what's going to happen in the future. You know that in Greece, in electricity, we are announcing prices 10 days before the start of a month. And so far, for the first 2 months that this happened, all companies have not managed to forecast the cost. So within a few days, we didn't manage to forecast the cost. So no one can say what the cost of gas or electricity is going to be in the future, at least today for 2023. So I cannot tell you what the costs are going to be. Now, what we have done, what is happening today was one of the scenarios that we have forecasted a year ago. So a year ago, we saw that this might happen. This was one of the scenarios. So what we did was to prepare a campaign to our customers, but also it was available to all Greek consumers, all consumers in Greece. This was a digital campaign, and also we had a campaign through our contact centers. And within this campaign, we were trying to explain to the consumers about what is happening and what it might happen in the future. And we tried to convince them that the only way forward would be to start to be more cautious regarding energy consumption. So to start saving energy. And this is, we have started it 12 months ago. We still believe that this is the first thing that the consumer should do. We should learn, this should become our culture, apart from SmartThing. Okay, SmartThing can achieve 20% savings. But I can tell you that if a household, the residents of a household, would be sensitive in the way that they are consuming energy, then they would already enjoy benefits from lower consumption. So this is the first thing. The most important thing is educating the consumers about saving energy. And of course, we're doing a number of other things because the costs are really high. Apart from credit and flexible credit terms and installments and things like that, this is something usual. I can refer to the actions that our shareholders has taken, the Paiborias. So for the last 12 months, there is a significant subsidy from our shareholder, horizontal subsidy to all consumer, which is really important, together with the state subsidies, which so far has managed to help the market in general, and of course the consumers.
Great, thank you. Mr. Popp, what is the view of Omexom in terms of the necessity towards the deployment of grids, fast deployment of electricity grids, and also the digitalization? What is your view on these two aspects? Digitalization,
yeah, okay. So before answering to this question, I think I didn't answer to one of the questions you asked me before. So, but I think there is something could be a valuable input for you. And that's what I want to share it. It's about smart cities. We don't like anymore this expression smart city. We better talk about local infrastructure solutions and make it a bit more clear what we're talking about. And I think in former times, smart city was a bit, someone had an idea, there was a tender, there was an offer, and then we put something in place and it worked or it didn't work. The difference today is that we have another approach. And I think this is very important. And that's what I want to share with you, because we try to always have a kind of systemic vision of our markets, which means to well understand the globality of all interactions and all social, political, and social technical influences, which of course can be very different from one country to another. And a keyword here is social engineering, where we mean considering the user's needs, and that's very important. And we try to mobilize sociological methods like surveys, quantitative analysis, and user passes to better understand the users' needs, because at the end we do it for the users, for the citizens, and then we can, if we know their needs, we can tailor-made and customize the offers to find the most suitable solutions. And this is a very important approach. And also we can say that there is no smart infrastructure of a city or something else without smart citizen. So we need to onboard the people and to accompany and educate them for more sobriety. And this is the new and promising way we see. So this was about smart cities, which we don't really like as expression. And to answer to the question about digitalization, which is a very huge and complex question, as we can see, we already have huge challenges to tackle regarding aging grid infrastructures. We need to retrofit and modernize them just to keep them alive, because if we don't do so, they will die. They don't work anymore. But in addition, there are even bigger challenges to tackle, which requires digital support. And that's for sure. So firstly, we have let's say, first driver is the energy mix. The trend goes toward more and more electricity in the global energy mix. It will likely be 50% by 2050, including enabling hydrogen. And secondly, there is this enormous increasing quantity of intermittent renewable energies we need to integrate into our grids, which is first, let's say, a technical challenge itself, because the energy production depends on sun and wind, but we permanently need stable and secured energy supply, independent of sun and wind. So there must be new solutions to store energy and to provide backup solutions, keywords being batteries and green hydrogen as a new energy vector. And coming with it, there is very often an enormous shift in capacity flows, which means that, I think most of you know that, that the places where renewable energies is generated are different from former places where we produced energy with fossil energy and with nuclear and what else, while the users stay in the same places. So, and finally, depending on the technology, we have huge energy losses and other impacts on our grids. For example, climate impacts, storms and wildfires destroying or harms our infrastructures. So beyond structural solutions, construction and so on, which is more the building part, digitalization is key. Because we need to be able to optimize the balance of demand response, capacities and losses, economic efficiency and availability. We must be able to detect errors or emerging risks or even damaging events. And this means more focus on the right and necessary data, advanced monitoring and control systems, fault detection systems, and predictive maintenance. And if you go a bit further, there is artificial intelligence that might offer us new options and solutions for the future. So it's a lot about digitalization. And in a nutshell, digitalization is an integral part to make our grids smarter, but also more reliable, resilient, flexible, sustainable, and at the end, which is very important, also affordable.
Thank you. Professor Kalogirou, as our time is up, yes. I would like you, in 2 words, the idea about electromobility sector in Cyprus and concluding remarks.
Yes, of course, I don't have numbers. However, I can tell you that there are 2 schemes running, one for subsidizing about a fifth of the price of an electric vehicle. And one which is much more effective and more important to my idea is that it's a scheme which subsidizes combine a PV roof with an electric car, which means that you solve in a way the charging points which are there in every city now and many supermarkets and many other places they have. However, you cannot satisfy everybody. Whereas if you have your own charging point charged by your PV roof, free of charge, in other words, it means that this is a very, very good incentive for people to invest even to a more expensive electric vehicle, which is the fact that this is happening. If I may allow just a few seconds to complement what just said about the smart systems, is that what we need is a large-scale smart system. We need to have a huge penetration of renewables into our grids. So we need to predict what will be the solar radiation in the next 1, 2, or 3 hours, how much would be the wind, and so on and so forth. What would be the demand, and take decisions. I'm going to tell the renewable storage to users, to which kind of renewable goes where, and all these things. These things, of course, artificial intelligence as well, and a lot of smartness as well. So there is bright future coming up, and I think like the two young persons we have seen before with these smart ideas and very brilliant ideas, we can put this forward for the future. Thanks a lot again for the opportunity to be here.
I want to thank you all for participating in the panel. The discussion was very interesting, a large panel, but I think that the ideas were very insightful and I think helped the people that heard us. Thank you very much.